Well, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Often tech talks and tech conferences like this are focusing on the flashy new technology, pushing things forward. You have dinners on the Eiffel Tower, VR headsets, gaming. But Ewan, let's try to bring it back down to ground a little bit. Can you explain why there's a connection between the metaverse and social mobility, and why that connection is really important?
Yeah, no, sure. So this kind of builds a little bit on what Lisa Cameron was saying earlier on. I don't know if anyone was here for the first session, but she was touching on the wider sort of societal impact of new technology like the metaverse. Maybe just to quickly, I'm conscious that not everyone will have heard of the EY Foundation, so we're a social mobility charity. And we exist because in the UK, there's 2 million young people eligible for free school meals. That's a core definition of poverty. And that means that if you're, when they get to the age of 27, on average, they're 3 times more likely to be unemployed. So this is kind of like a really big issue for the UK. It's obviously a massive issue for those young people, but it's it's an issue for the whole country. And so we kind of deliver programs, we do paid work experience, employability skills training, but we really want to how do we make an impact at a systemic level? How do we kind of ensure that all those young people have the same opportunities to thrive in the workplace? And I think anything that looks at systemic change has to look at technology and what does things like the metaverse, what does that mean for the future of work? And that's kind of where we're coming from, and that's why we're looking at this so closely. Another angle is in terms of employers, and we work with a lot of employers. There's a much greater interest in social mobility, inclusion, the S in ESG, I guess. And working with them, we kind of know that this is like a big priority, and we know as technology changes, they're looking increasingly, how do they ensure that this is an inclusive space? EY did a survey recently, and 64% of employers think that metaverse is going to offers an opportunity to create a step change in diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
And how might it do so? What are the upsides? How do we leverage this technology to increase social mobility?
So I think there are huge opportunities. I mean, the headline risk, which was kind of touched on in the previous talk, is obviously the cost. So we know that 2 million households don't have home access to the internet. We know that 26% of young people don't have access to a laptop. So there's kind of those obvious kind of first access issues of actually how do you get into this space. But there's much more to consider once people are in that space, and there's risk. There's kind of huge risk. So we know that 10 million people don't have essential digital skills. So if you don't have the basic digital skills now, what's that going to mean when work's increasingly dominated by things like the metaverse? But we also think there's huge opportunities. So as it stands today, employability skills are hard to come by if you're from a certain background, a certain school, a certain range of networks that you're part of. In the future, we could be building universities, employability skills universities, where you could have access to the best tuition, the global experts. You could be getting immersive experiences in different types of jobs, in interview situations. You get support in CV writing, virtual collaboration with people across all these incredible opportunities. And maybe even a bigger opportunity could be in terms of work experience. So today, it's unbelievably biased towards who you know, family connections, where can you find out about different job opportunities. In the metaverse, you could access any job. You could find out about any type of career. It could be virtually reimagined. You can explore anything from engineering to being a chef, to being working in sport. Everything could be there for you. So in the future, you could both get employability skills, but you could also experience lots of different careers, and so that you're much better prepared for the future of work.
That work experience thing seems really exciting, especially because then you don't have to kind of be constrained by the physical being there. There's a lot more options that are open to you. What about the downsides? What in particular are you worried about in terms of maybe exacerbating social inequality?
Well, I mean, I think the really obvious one in terms of the cost. In the last talk, talked about the Quest. It's £499. That's still expensive for a lot of people. Apple Vision Pro expected to be over £3,000. If you're not affording Wi-Fi, if you can't afford a Wi-Fi, those extra tools are going to be difficult. But also, can we see in the internet today, there's kind of digital walls that companies can create, and there's no we shouldn't assume from what we see in online today that it's all going to be good. And I think it's really important that we're looking at, before new technology gets baked in terms of ways of working, we need to be looking at what can we do to ensure that the framework, the way that it's set up, is biased or not biased. It's kind of inclusive and ensuring that all people have the same opportunities to succeed.
So, I mean, as with any new technology, any new exciting technology, there's upsides, there's downsides. How do we ensure that the upsides outweigh the downsides, especially in terms of, I guess, inclusion and social inequality in this case?
So I think this is where we're starting to look at, and this is, we're at the start of this journey. We're wanting to, work with other organisations on this, and the first sort of project that we're leading is a collaboration. So EY have a division called the Metaverse Lab, which is based in the USA. They've done a lot of work in different aspects of diversity in terms of race, gender, and neurodiversity. And the approach they're taking is working with artists to kind of reimagine and to bring a different perspective into the metaverse, to sort of uncover perhaps hidden barriers, things that would affect people from different backgrounds. And so we're looking at that model. We're working with that team. We're also working with Ofcom, so I'm sure everyone's aware, there's a UK communications regulator. And this is a really important issue for them in terms of sort of literacy in this space. They focus on media literacy generally, but what does literacy mean in the metaverse? What is it going to mean for regulation? So we're working with government through Ofcom, working with EY, and then we're also working with the School of Digital Art in Manchester to bring a bit of sort of academic rigor to sort of insights that we can develop in this space. So the project itself is working with a leading kind of up-and-coming artist in Manchester called Alina Akbar, who comes from a working-class background, and a group of young people eligible for free school meals. And we're going to be running a series of workshops with them to explore this space, the different kind of aspects and likely developments within the metaverse, and to then get their perspective on what do they see as the opportunities, what are the sort of the risks that are kind of jumping out of them as they kind of go on this journey, so that we can collect those insights, we can kind of produce kind of a set of recommendations, and then so things like, I was really glad that sort of Lisa Cameron made that offer at the beginning to sort of go back to her with follow-up suggestions and things on how things can be developed, because that's exactly what we'll have in a few months. Then kind of that's kind of like the project that we're leading at the moment.
Why is it so important to go directly to the communities themselves that might benefit or might be harmed by this technology?
Yeah, well, I think outside of technology, there's so much, whenever sort of often action that's taken to support people who are excluded, whether it's social mobility or other aspects of inclusion and diversity, things tend to be done to people. So it's kind of like this, we think this is the kind of the solution, and there we go, that's going to fix it. For us, we think it's much more important to flip that around and to really understand from young people who we work, what are the issues that you experience, that you think exist or are going to affect you in the future, rather than us kind of telling them what those issues are going to be. So flipping it around, working with those young people, getting I think the artist impression is really interesting. Obviously, the sector is dominated an engineering mindset. There's quite a narrow sector of society is probably working in these sort of technologies. Bringing in that completely new take on those issues, I think, could uncover barriers and kind of opportunities, particularly that perhaps other people hadn't been thinking about. So I think that really opens up some opportunity for new ideas. And in terms of those kind of recommendations and how we take them forward, we'd love to work with other employers in this space, how we actually test out these recommendations, perhaps towards the end of this year, looking into next year. We're working with the World Economic Forum in partnership with EY as part of their Global Futures Council to sort of look at recommendations that perhaps would be developed on a more international scale. So just I guess kind of just loads of opportunities, but I think this is the time to be doing this before working in the metaverse becomes the norm. I think getting the right framework in place is going to be really important.
And EY's focus is in the UK mostly. How important is it, and what might be different about adopting the metaverse in the UK versus globally? What other considerations do you have to take into account?
So I mean, EY's headquarters in the US, so it's properly sort of global company. But yeah, I think there's going to be, global standards. So the Metaverse Standards Forum is another group that we're engaging with to look at like what are the standards that need to be sort of implemented globally. But also, I think regulation, obviously varies hugely. I think there's a bit of a, not divide, but a different approach on this side of the Atlantic compared to the US. I think it's potentially a bit more hands-off on the US side. So I think there will need to be differentiated approach. There need to be like tailored approaches in different locations. But I think really the starting point is to recognize that there are these potential issues, which I don't think are often discussed at the moment, raise those issues, kind of understand what those barriers are, how they can be tackled, and then we can kind of move forward from there, I think.
Yeah. And say you're a company working in the metaverse space, and you're like, okay, social mobility is a problem, inclusion is a problem, I want to work on this. What next? Like, what concrete steps can you take to kind of move in the right direction?
So, I mean, there is an offer for organizations to get in touch with the EY Foundation. So my name is relatively unusual on LinkedIn, so you could find me there. You can get in touch via our website. But also the recommendations that we produce will be sort of promoted and shared so that people, they'll be freely accessible. And I think also just looking at, all we're doing really, we're not bringing a huge technical perspective to this. We're looking at what are the barriers in the physical world, what are the things like work experience, access to employability skills, training, and then just imagining that in a virtual space and looking at what are the opportunities and threats in that world, and anyone can be doing that. So it'd be great to work with us, but also there's lots of stuff people can be doing by themselves as organizations.
One question that I have is the metaverse is still it's an exciting technology, it's still kind of in the future. There are a lot of problems in the present, like digital literacy, just dealing with Web3, our computers, our devices. Why focus on the future, or how do you combine that focus on the future with the focus on the immediate problems in the present?
Yeah, so, I mean, 100%, and we're like a relatively small charity. This isn't our core focus. We're still delivering employability, workshops, training, work experience. There's lots of other organizations also in this space. It's kind of that has to be the sort of primary focus today. But looking, this, again, in the previous talk, the speed of change is incredibly quick. If we're not getting the processes, the frameworks in place now for how work will be looking, in 4 or 5, maybe 10 years, things are changing today. Like people are being interviewed for jobs in the metaverse today. It's kind of like this is with us. It's only going to get bigger. So it's not our entire focus, but it's just an important sort of aspect of how we're looking to help shape the future in terms of addressing social mobility.
Is there any kind of aspect of the metaverse that you were surprised to see influence social mobility or inequality, like something you might not have anticipated on first look?
I mean, I think the default reaction to this is to see it as a problem and the cost. I think it feels like a lot of people don't get beyond the cost aspect, and I think that's where the sort of conversation often seems to end. But I think when you look at this, the next stage, like I was sort of saying earlier, in terms of what opportunities this could create, I think it's that sort of unlimited scale of, like I say, training. Like there's no class size limit. At the moment we would run workshops of 20 people, 20 young people. This could be, unlimited. Every young person, it's totally realistic that every young person could get the best support in their journey into work. I think the work experience point, we know that, so the Institute of Engineering and Technology, they're looking at this now, like how do they demonstrate different roles in those sectors in a metaverse style space so that people can experience them. I mean, my daughter at the moment is looking at work experience. She'll probably experience 2 different career options in a couple of weeks. In the future, any young person could experience hundreds of different job opportunities. So I think this could be like incredible. But there has to be, this isn't going to be one organization doing it on its own. There has to be sort of a collective willingness and desire to make it happen, which is what we're hoping to start now.
Awesome. Well, the timer is blinking at us, and I share that optimistic vision of the future, where I hope that we can leverage the benefits, move away from the potential costs. And yeah, thank you so much, Ewan, for joining us, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.